Russia is interesting in that they also have a lot of natural resources, especially gas, which means yeah, they start out using a lot of gas, which means that like if you ban coal, they don't really care. If you ban oil, they don't really care, which means that their HDI will pretty much remain unchanged throughout the entire game. It will even rise higher. So Russia is actually a very good place to establish your headquarters, which is exactly what I did actually. Simply because well, their high HDI means you can research there. They will research technologies on their own pretty quickly too, which means if you want to do like the space program or whatever, that will be fairly easy because you don't need to manually acquire all the technologies because some are just available locally. And you obviously won't have troubles with austerity stuff either. Otherwise, they're not very problematic. You can expand natural gas production here because they have the second biggest reserves in the world. But other than that, there's not actually a whole lot to Russia. As you may have noticed, actually a lot of my cards played here have been for more global matters, like expanding gas, research, that kind of stuff. So once you stabilize them at the start, like play a little medical cards and whatever, and later on I actually played CCS here too, they won't give you much trouble. Now, the Middle East is actually probably the single most interesting region in most of my games because they become stupidly overgrown. Seriously. Like, if you look at it, this is how their GDP starts and this is what it ends at. If you look at it in terms of rankings, their GDP is almost 30,000, which is double that of the second, which is North Africa. And if you look at, hang on, there it is. If you look at GDP per capita, that's the second biggest in the world, following Russia. And if you look at, I can never find these. Here it is. If you look at the capital index of industry, it goes from like 100 to, well, 1,500, which is double that of the second and like 1,000 more than most of the world, which is where their wealth comes from. I have absolutely no idea why this happens. My best guess is, like Russia, they're usually not that hit by bans because they also have a lot of gas locally. Obviously oil did hurt them just a little, but they actually never use coal. They use a lot of gas mostly, and they can always turn to their own gas whenever you ban anything. So that won't cause them issues, which basically means they can grow freely throughout the whole game. And unlike Russia, which has a population of 100 million, Middle East actually has a population of, well, right now it's 800 million, but it actually went up to 1 billion here. I actually had to play one-child policy for a bit to stop that, which is probably the reason why they get so much investment, because there's a lot of people. There isn't an energy shortage. And since I have actually played quite a few cards that like educated and whatever at the start, these are more or less well-trained workers, and there's a lot of them. It's a big place. There's plenty of water, at least at the start. So that's probably why their economy tends to boom a lot Because of this, the Middle East actually might be a good place to build your headquarters too. The only reason I don't is because, as you can see here, their HDI starts out pretty low and takes a while to get like above 0.9, unlike Russia, which already starts out at 0.9. So Russia just seems a bit more ideal to me. Let's move on to India, which is pretty much the single most problematic region in any game. I think we can all agree on that. Yeah, their HDI actually dipped down to 0.37 at one point after I banned coal, which is pretty terrible. And honestly, there's not a whole lot you can do about India. What I did was I changed their outlook to eco-fanatic, because that allows them to stay more or less content with lower HDI. So they didn't actually complain about having an HDI of like 0.6 for the longest time, and it was actually only near the end that I switched them back so they'd leave me alone about emissions. Yeah, obviously you need to stem their population like fast. I do that. Where is it? Here it is. I started one-child policy really early on, and it went on for a long time too. This is absolutely necessary because India is seriously overgrown at the start, and you do need to crop that down. But as you can see here, once it reaches a level of around 7 to 8 million, you can actually stop, and it will more or less stabilize on its own. As you can see, it's not actually rising or falling, which to me says that well, the region's natural population is at about 700 million instead of 1.5 billion, which it rose up to over here. Economy-wise, there is not a whole lot you can do about India, because unlike the Middle East, they don't have a lot of resources, which kind of means that they won't get nearly as much investment as the Middle East. They will have troubles with energy, and in fact, if you look at the renewables tab, their potentials are also very, very low. In fact, I'm fairly sure they're like the lowest in the entire game, except maybe Japan, which means that short of using the solar array, they can't really switch to renewables either, which kind of screws up their economy every time you ban a resource. Yeah. China is also problematic because their industry uses a lot of coal at the start, which is what caused this huge drop, because when I banned coal, their industry basically went down to zero. Which, the problem is that in my game I wanted to stop them from using, stop the world from using coal very, very early on. Which meant, most regions in the world can stop using coal in their industry in like 2 or 3 turns. India and China are the exceptions, because India takes about, 5. China takes 6, or yeah, I think they took 6. And as you can see here, this is the GDP produced by the industry. When I banned coal, it basically plummeted to 0. which meant that their HDI also plummeted because there was suddenly huge unemployment and GDP fell and whatever. Now, once you get over this, and you do need to finish playing this card, because if you don't, their industry will never actually recover, China will slowly start to grow again. Now, this is actually something that only happens in my game. So normally you can pretty much just normally China doesn't do this. Normally you can wait until this card finishes playing and then ban coal, and then China has no issues. Well, unless, you know, they do get like 60% of their energy from coal too, but that's another issue. But this time I wanted to ban coal really fast because it produces a lot of emissions, which meant I didn't have an extra 2 or 3 turns to wait for China to finish becoming coal free, which basically meant that I had to crash their economy completely. And obviously they were not happy about that. But as you can see, they do recover, although it takes a lot of time. Like India, you can't do much here. Reduce their population. That is needed here too, although not as much as in India. And eventually they'll switch over to complete renewables especially when you play the solar array card. Until then, they can just use gas, and yeah, that's basically what you have to do. And they'll like South Africa, actually, they're pretty much a middle region, maybe a bit lower than South Africa because they start out with a lot more population. But China isn't very troublesome if you don't screw things up. Oh yeah, one more thing that you can do is grow commerce, because after you crash their economy, they will well, when you play the job sharing initiative card, most people will go to agriculture. So about 60% of people will be in agriculture, which obviously doesn't produce much GDP, which obviously means their HDI is going to be crap. So you will want to grow commerce and possibly industry, or both at the same time, or just one. That's your choice, which should significantly help with GDP, because commerce produces the most money, obviously. What you should keep in mind is that China does have a huge population, so if you shift their workers around, that is gonna affect the global economy. And if you're not careful, like you shift a lot of people into commerce, then that might cause a financial collapse. So you do need to be careful about that. You also need to be careful about food, because China, India, and maybe South Asia, I think in my case, and the Middle East, they produce a lot of food. So if you switch a lot of people away from agriculture, that actually might cause some issues with the global food supply, especially if you've switched over to organic farming like I did.